Now everybody's either lifting these trucks or they're leveling them. Well, we're gonna lower ours down to put this supercharged power to the ground. Complete front and rear suspension lowdown on today's Tech Garage. Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now, we drove around our supercharged truck as a sleeper for long enough. It's time to turn it loose. So we're going to go ahead and drop the front end of the truck 2 inches and the rear end 4 inches to give it a performance look, almost to match that performance of the engine. We're also going to put some upgraded control arm on it, and we're going to put some slam air on the back after we drop it so we can still tow if we want to.
Hey, John, let's face it, you know, this truck's got over 100,000 miles on it, so it's a prime candidate for upper and lower control arms as part of the project. Now, this is major open heart surgery for anybody tackling it. You got to have the right quality parts and the right quality tools, and you got to be willing to take your time. Now, a couple first steps for us. You got to remove the caliper assembly, get it completely out of your way. We've got it strapped back with our shop Tech Garage famous bungee cord here, and it can remain there for the duration of the project. It won't hurt anything. Next, we're going to have to disconnect the upper and lower control arm mounting bolts, the upper ball joint, the lower ball joint, the tie rod end, the sway bar disconnect. We're going to get our rotor out of the way, and then we can get started. I'm going to start with the bottom strut mounts. There's a lot of disassembly required, but I got to tell you, the first thing you have to do is mark your alignment shims against the frame with some whiteout. Anybody's got that. I'm going to do this on the back side. You can see exactly how it works. Where the alignment shim touches the shoulder of the frame is where you want to make your mark. So when you reinstall everything, you're at least going to be close. You'll still need to go get a professional alignment, but now you've got some area, close proximity, to make sure you can drive this thing and get it to the shop for the alignment. So lots of uninstalling to do in step one. I'm going to get started, and John's going to show us exactly how this whole thing's going to work.
Now, there's a bunch of suspension systems out there, but I have two of the most popular right here out in front of us to take a look at. The first one's a McPherson strut system. Now, a McPherson strut goes from the top of the frame down to the spindle. It's pretty common, but better yet, I have the short, long arm suspension system, and that one's right here. This is what our truck has. Now, this is an older S10 model, but it's the same concept. Short, long arm being the short arm on the top, long arm on the bottom. Still have the control arms, my spindle's right here, and this one's going to do the same thing on our truck. Now, our truck's right here. This is a short, long arm suspension system, and I have a cool demonstration to show you because our chief technician, Chase, he went out and he got the exact spindle that matches the truck, just a couple years older, but it's the same actual concept. So if I set them up like this side by side, this is the drop spindle from Rough Country, and you can see here what's happening. It's going to be about 2 inches up, the wheel's going to move up, thus the truck's going to lower down. That's the spindle we're going to put on. We're also going to replace the control arms. Now, Moog sent us these control arms, and they're precision perfectly, so the geometry of the truck's going to stay exactly the same. The control arms are nice because they have a removable ball joint, and they also have gusher technology. Well, what is gusher technology? It's pretty cool. If you look right here, I'll show you. It's a little porous material inside that ball joint, so when I pump this, you can see it actually starts to ooze out. That's going to keep that ball joint lubricated and last for a long time. Now we move to the rear of the truck. Now on the rear of the truck, Rough Country sent us a 4-inch lowering kit, so we're going to have to take the leaf spring and we're going to move it up from the top of the actual differential down to the bottom. So we're going to need a 4-inch drop to do that, and that's going to lower the rear 4 inches. And because we did that, we're going to add the slam air kit to it from Airlift, and what that's going to do, it's going to give us the ability to tow. So we're going to install this motor right here, which is an Airlift, a solenoid, and a remote switch. So in case we want to go out there and tow and still use our supercharged truck in a towing capacity, hit a button, lifts up the rear end, we're good to go. Well, that's all the parts. We need to get to work. I think Brian's progressing really well.
John, I think we're making great progress over here. We got the upper control arm out, the old lower control arm out, the old spindle assembly removed, and that took a little bit of work and a little bit of wrestling here with the strut. Of course, the sway bar and the tie rod are disconnected as well. Once we had everything out, we could go ahead and transfer the wheel bearing over to the new spindle, as well as get our new upper control arm in. Along with the Moog control arms, we also got the Moog eccentric adjustment kit. What that means is you want to have tremendous flexibility and adjustability with camber once this project is done. So that kit's going to give us that. You might remember we marked our factory eccentric before we tore it all apart. And what I did, I laid the new Moog one right next to it, transferred the mark over, and up here you can see that we've got those marks lined up. It's not perfect, but it's certainly going to make this thing drivable to get it to a professional alignment once all of our work is done. All the new bolts are in, they only go in one way. Make sure you get that right so you've got that camber adjustment. Everything's loose, the lower control arm bolts are in. I've got the nuts on. This is heavy, I don't want anything falling down. And I'm going to go ahead and swing this up with the spindle on it and try to marry up the upper ball joint, get a nut on it. So I've got everything, final assembly, just about done. So we're going to swing that up. And it's actually helpful to have that wheel bearing transferred because it gives you something to hold on to. Get the nut here, get it started. You may need a buddy here, this isn't light, but now we've got everything pre-connected. And I was darn sure to take care of that wheel speed sensor harness all along the way. So we're making great progress. Stay with us here on Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Airlift, tow and haul with safety and comfort. Stage 8, the world's best locking fastener. Steel Rubber, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. And by Advance Auto Parts, let's get you back to the garage.
All set. That's the cotter key on the lower ball joint. Welcome back to Tech Garage. We're just about buttoned up. I'll be honest, we had to give some of the 100,000-mile parts some encouragement along the way, but we've got everything uninstalled and reinstalled, and we've taken our time. Everything from the lower mounting bolts, upper mounting bolts are torqued back to spec. The wheel bearing back in place, torqued back to spec. The caliper mounting bracket torqued back to spec. You see a pattern here? We're trying to be very precise all along the way because ultimately it's all about the alignment and how close we can get it until we get in for a professional alignment once the project's done. We were especially considerate of our eccentrics along the way, as I said. We want to make this final alignment adjustment relatively easy for our professional shop once we take the truck there. So I'm ever closer. I have one more mounting tab up here on top of the spindle that holds the wheel speed sensor in place. That's now tight. I made sure we did no damage to the wheel speed sensor connector up here. It's mounted back in the bracket, so nothing is going to get in the way as this suspension travels. But the alignment, I can't stress how important that is when you're lowering or raising a vehicle. John's going to help us understand exactly what that means.
Well, you've been hearing a lot about alignment, so how about a class Alignment 101? But before I talk about alignment, I want to look at some tire wear patterns. 2 are affected by alignment and 2 are not. Look up at the top left of the screen up there. You can actually see overinflation. Now my overinflated tire, that's pretty simple. Too much air, it's going to wear right in the middle. Over to the next of it, you can see underinflation. Not enough air, both sides are going to sag down, it's going to wear on both sides. Now feathering and camber are tire wearing problems that are going to be affected by alignment angles. What are alignment angles? Brian mentioned the eccentric. Well, whether it's an eccentric or you have some shims here, or you may have an offset bushing for the ball joint. All this right here allows you to do the alignment. It allows you to move the control arm, the shock tower, the strut, whatever it may be, to get those angles. And I'll give you a good demonstration. First one I want to talk about is camber. And my control arm, if I put it up here, and we want to take camber, you take the eccentrics on the truck over there, and we'll move them both out. We'll move them both out equal amounts. And what that's going to do, it's actually going to take the tire here and it's going to push it out. Now I'm over exaggerating it, but it's pushing it out. That's positive camber. If the tires are flared out like that, that's positive camber and it's going to wear on the outside edge of your tire. Just the opposite, if the control arm goes in at the top, it's going to pull the tire in this direction, and that's going to wear up the inside portion of the tire. So no matter what, if the control arm's out or in, you're going to have inside or outside tire wear, positive and negative camber. But think about it this way too. If I had my tires and I go this way, is positive and negative, naturally I'm going to pull to the most positive side of that camber. Now the next alignment angle is caster. Now caster is not a tire wearing angle, but it helps the car stability, it helps the steering wheel return. caster is also positive and negative. And I can do it right here on the spindle, which is pretty cool, or you can use your arm right at home. If I take the spindle and I move it with the eccentrics, one positive, one negative, I'm going to take the spindle forward. And if you take your arm at the top and move it forward, the wheel's going to move back in the fender well. That's negative caster. Now, negative caster may cause your car to wander a bit, so that's why we put positive caster. We put the control arm towards the back. That's positive caster. As it's going in that direction, the tires go up front. That gives you good stability. You ever rode your bicycle and let go of the wheel and it wants to go straight on its own? That's because the bicycle has a massive amount of positive caster built into it. And caster is not a tire wearing angle, but if you think about it, if I put one forward and I put one back, we're always going to pull to the most negative caster. The car is going to want to pull to that direction. So you may have a pull issue. The last one is toe. Now, we can take our tires here. It's pretty simple. Toe was controlled by the actual tie rod ends. And if I put a tire on each side of this car here, I'll just do it right in front of you. If we go ahead and we toe the tires in, that's positive toe. But you think about it, those tires are going down the road, we're scuffing from the outside to the inside direction. That's that feathering wear right there. Now we can toe them this way, toe out, and they're going to feather this way. So you want to make sure, after all that work, that those tires are lined up perfectly straight. Now, you can do this right in the driveway. You can take a tape measure and go to the front of the tires, and then you can go to the back of the tires and just measure the distance and get them equal, and you can get it close. Now, Brian kept alluding to the eccentrics there and the alignment angles, and no matter what you do, if there's any suspension work you do on it or steering work, you can get it close, but you still need to get it to a professional alignment shop to the point where you can go ahead and get a perfect alignment. Well, we'll be right back with more Tech Garage right after this break.
Here's a Tech Garage pop quiz. Which of the following is likely to indicate a worn or damaged front spring? A, noise. B, incorrect ride height measurement. C, failing a jounce test. Or D, discoloration of the spring. The correct answer is B. Springs control vehicle ride height, and incorrect ride height measurement would indicate a worn spring.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. We're about 3/4 of the way through the Silverado Lowdown project. Now, a couple tips for you here. We're fortunate to be working under a lift, but if you're working on jack stands, this is a really good moment to go around to all four corners and make sure your vehicle remains very stable. You're also going to need a few additional jack stands to put under this axle housing when you relocate the leaf spring to the bottom side. You don't want this beast going anywhere you haven't planned. So I'm going to get this shock out. I've got some of my bolts loose. The good news is this isn't a terribly complex project, but you've got to have the right tools for the job, not just in terms of time, but in terms of your safety. An impact gun or two, John's going to show you why an air chisel will make a huge difference, a grinder, and of course a sledge. Now, we've already lowered the driver's side rear, and John's going to show you exactly all that we've done while I get started.
Yeah, and we've done a lot. Start over here, you can see the actual leaf spring. The first thing we needed to do with the rough country drop kit is we needed to take the leaf spring from the top of the axle and remove it down to the bottom. So we took the whole leaf spring out and did that. In order to relocate it, we had this bracket that they sent us, and what this bracket actually does, it actually moves the leaf spring up higher on the frame. This way the truck body actually is going to sit lower. We also needed to take these extensions on our U-bolts and put them down here on the bottom. Once we had that all in place, well, Airlift sent us an air slam. Why? Well, because we dropped it, really, it's not good for towing anymore. They solved that problem. We went ahead and remanufactured a bracket right here, put this airlift system in here, so now we can tow as well. What do the shocks and the springs do? Well, the shocks and the springs work together in conjunction. The springs themselves, see, they control the vehicle's ride height. My leaf spring here controls the ride height. You may have a coil spring. If you have a coil spring, the higher the coil spring, the higher the ride ride height, the smaller the coil spring, the lower the ride height. My shocks, on the other hand, they control spring oscillations. So you can look inside of here, and this is a good cutaway of a shock absorber. What happens if you have some hydraulic fluid right here, and then this is a gas shock, so I have gas down here. So what's going to happen is it's going to keep a cushion there to keep it from getting aerated, and that's what gives you that nice ride and keeps those tires on the road. The really cool part here is you can see if I hold these two up, the rough country versus the stock one, there's our 4-inch lift right there. And this is really important because you may lift a truck or drop it, and you want that shock to ride right where it needs to ride inside of there to get the optimum performance. Brian, looks like you need a hand.
I sure could use one. This leaf spring's ready to get relocated and come down to the lower side. My front mount's loose. I just need to give it a little encouragement when you're ready.
Let me get this bolt out over here.
Really important to have your axle supported at this stage of the game.
All right, put the axle down a little bit so we can get it. Hold on, let's take the axle down a little bit here. Should
Take
come
the
right out of
tension
there.
off.
Yep.
We'll lower that and get that tension right out of there.
Just
Little
make sure-
encouragement.
There
Okay,
you go.
I'm loose.
Now make sure you check your lines. You don't want any lines taut, any or brake lines or emergency brake cable. There you go.
Okay, I got the block.
If you want to go up,
Yep.
I'll try to
Go
cross
up.
over.
Go over top of that drum.
There we go.
Once you're clear, come on down.
All right, look at that.
Set it right here. Well done.
All right, that's awesome. Well, all that's left now is what we need to do is we need to go ahead and grind that off, then put that little snubber bumper up, because remember, we're taking the frame and moving it up, and then what I'll do is I'll start chiseling over here. So you go ahead and take a short break. We'll get this ground off and chiseled. We'll be right back with more Tech Garage right after this.
Here's a Tech Garage pop quiz. Which vehicles would most likely incorporate a leaf spring suspension? A. Front-wheel drive vehicles with non-independent rear suspension. B. Rear-wheel drive vehicles with independent rear suspension. C. Front-wheel drive vehicles with independent rear suspension. Or D. Rear-wheel drive vehicles with non-independent rear suspension. The correct answer is D. Most rear-wheel drive vehicles with non-independent suspension use a leaf spring suspension system. This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Dustless Blasting. It's the future of surface preparation. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. Optima Batteries, powering your passion. And by Advance Auto Parts, let's get you back to the garage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. We're making great progress on the Silverado Lowdown kit. Now here's what we've done so far. We've relocated this leaf spring stack down to the bottom of the axle. Now it's not terribly difficult to do. You've got some homework though. You got to remove that factory eye bolt from the leaf spring stack, turn it upside down, and your rough country mounting plate on the bottom makes an accommodation for that. Not hard to do. The bracket that was on the bottom goes to the top to be the shoulders to catch the tops of your new U-bolts. We, of course, have the front spring mount bolt up, in, and torqued. And at the back, we had to cut off this original bracket. John chiseled that off with an air chisel, which made that a whole lot more manageable. We've relocated it to use for the airbag system, the slam air system. This is all up and in, the new bracket's in place. Everything is torqued to spec up here as well. And of course, we've got our rough country shocks in place. Those are going to really help this thing handle well. So I think we're in good shape. I'm going to finish the slam airbag mount, just a U-bolt here, and we'll get our airlines run. But to do that, we've got to have an air supply, and John's got the air pump installation.
Now what we went through in the rear, this is a piece of cake. It's time to put the airlift system in, and there's nothing to it. You got an air pump, and you got an actual solenoid here that's gonna have some electrical connections that's gonna run to the front, that's gonna allow the air to go through when we want it to go through. Now I got a nice little place pre-drilled up here. I'm gonna put the air solenoid right there. And why do I wanna do that? Because I want the air pump to run right to it. So I can go right there with a straight, and then I got the 90 coming out right here, and I can take these air lines and I can run from here back tee it to those bags that you saw earlier. Piece of cake, nice quick connect fittings, little fittings on the back if you want to fill it, or we can use a remote. Now the second piece of the puzzle, I'm going to take a wire harness, and I already got it pre-wired, and all I need to do is just tuck it up to the front of the vehicle, go ahead and mount the relay back here, run it up there, get it to a fuse protection place where it'll be fused up and powered and ready to go. The key is just make sure you take your time, do your wire practices good, you're in good shape. We'll be able to take this Lowdown truck up and down anywhere we want it. All we have left is the email question of the week.
John, Asher from Georgia emailed us. He's got an 06 Ram pickup and the front end pops when he backs out of his driveway or sometimes when he hits bumps. Any ideas?
Well, classic ball joint issue. Now, checking ball joints, we got some worn out ones right here you can see. I mean, these things are falling out of there. Look under there, check your boot, make sure nothing's torn. But it might not be that simple. So Asher, if you go out to your driveway, one thing you have to know, which one's the loaded or the following ball joint. And I can give you a quick tip. If you look in your springs located between your control arms, you want to support it with a jack stand in your driveway on the control arm itself so you can free up the ball joints to check it. Now, you may have one that's like this on top and you got the actual ball joint on top. If that's the case, put the jack stand on the frame so then your ball joints will be unloaded and you can go out there and check them.
And if you need to check your wheel bearing, don't forget the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock rule. 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, get your vehicle up off the ground, unload the suspension. If you've got any motion, any movement, any sounds at all, you need a new wheel bearing or hub assembly.
Yeah, well, we got our truck all beefed up. You know, we started out with that supercharger, brakes. It's doing pretty good.
Absolutely, and that thing breathes now. Man, it sounds good with the Borla exhaust on it. A lot more air in, a lot more air out, nothing but performance in the Silverado.
Yeah, you know, and I couldn't fathom putting them factory wheels back on there. I mean, that would have killed me. So, you know, thanks to MHT wheels, we got those Dub 8 balls on there, and that set the truck off. I mean, not only does it perform, it looks phenomenal.
Well, the rough country lowering kit's really nice in the stance, but we kept the performance in that. Our original issue was it didn't tow very well. Didn't have the power, certainly didn't have the brake horsepower to tow, but we kept that intact with the SLAM airbag system. Now we can do whatever we want with that truck.
What else can we do? For more on Tech Garage, follow us on Twitter. But for now, it's time to say goodbye. From our garage to your garage. Thanks for watching Tech Garage.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola College is a member institution of the Florida College System, with a current enrollment of over 2,000 students. Chipola offers bachelor's and associate degree programs, as well as college credit and workforce development certificates. Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.